Okay, hello everyone to today's interval seminar. Our speaker today will be Simon Roux from ENSTA Bretagne in Brest. And yes, let me shortly introduce Simon. Simon did in 2017 his PhD in a Franco-British collaboration between ENSTA Bretagne in Brest and the University of Sheffield. Afterwards, he has been a postdoc researcher at IMT Atlantique in Nantes. And yes, currently he's working as an associate professor at ENSTA Bretagne in the areas of constraint propagation, interval methods, and especially also interval methods with respect to state estimation. And that's the area where your talk will come from now, Simon. The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks a lot, Andreas, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to give a presentation in these seminars. So my talk will focus on a problem we encounter in robotics. So it will be mainly related to mobile robotics, which is a field we are working on in Brest. And this is a work that has been done in collaboration with Benoît Desrochers and Luc Jolin. So we'll speak about it later in this presentation, but first I will introduce my talk with some set membership tools that I will present in order to just set the basis before the next part of the presentation related to data association. So, of course, if anything is not clear enough, do not hesitate to interrupt me, and as well, if it's too obvious, do not hesitate to interrupt me neither. So what we are dealing with classically in mobile robotics is these classical state estimation equations. So we have the evolution function f that can be possibly nonlinear, and we have our state x, vector x depicting our robot. So in this presentation, it will depict mainly the position of the robot, heading and speed. And we have possibly an input vector u as input of the system. And as well, we have the observation equation with function g, possibly nonlinear also. And we have measurement vectors y that are not continuous in this case. So several vectors yi. So in this talk, we consider things as in a dynamical system. So we consider that states and inputs, for instance here, all evolve with time, and so we'll consider them as trajectories and not only independent states. And it's not the same for the input vector, measurement vector, sorry, that is directly the vector y. So we have uncertain trajectories, and because we are in a set membership context, we'll handle them, manipulate them by means of sets that are, in our case, tubes. So tubes are simply the equivalent for intervals, but related to trajectories. They are intervals of trajectories, and in our case, multidimensional intervals of trajectories. So here is a simple example of a scalar tube, a 1D tube, enclosing an uncertain trajectory depicted in orange here, x star. So we don't know x star in our applications, but we will manipulate the bounds of the tube as we do usually with intervals. So the bounds are trajectories also, x minus and x plus, and we will perform a set of operations on these bounds in order to narrow the sets, the tube set, and then finally converge to a better approximation of our uncertain trajectories. So practically in a computer, our tubes are represented by sets of slices like on this slide. So it's a choice, a choice that we made to use boxes, slices to represent them. And as you can see, we have like this a list of boxes to represent the evolution of the bounds of the tubes. We also add possibly some gates that are depicted in black here, for adding some information about this representation of tubes. The gates depict the feasible values of the trajectories at a given time. For instance, here, T3, we have this gate here. So the gates, the slides, sorry, are not all of identical widths. We can have some custom time step of the tube for representing things according to the evolution of the tube to be more precise or more efficient. Because of course, the thinner the slices, the better the approximation of the tube, but the computation will be more heavier, of course. So this is a choice that we made in the Kodak library. So I will speak about it a bit later, about this new Kodak library. But it's a computer library that provides some tools to work on interval sets with applications to robotics. And of course, we provide in this library tools like this tube for implementing uncertain trajectories. So here is an example of a tube coming from actual measurements with a realistic robot. We have on the robot some sensors. For instance, here we have a DVL and an IMU. And this sensor provides information about the speed or the orientation of the robot. And as we do with classical interval analysis, we can compute basic operations in a reliable way and propagate the equations, the uncertainties along the equations, and finally obtain a reliable representation of our state. And for instance, here we have reliably results about the velocity of the robot along the x-axis. And because these values evolve with time, we are able to enclose these values in a tube like this. So you can see here the different slices of the tube when we zoom on it. And this will be basics of then our solver and our computations. So if you come back to our state equations, for instance, this first one here, we will see how we can use tubes and some operators to perform state estimation in this context. So we have our evolution equation. For instance, it will be given here by these sub-equations here. So it depicts a classical car moving on a plane. In robotics, it's usual equations. So we have x1 and x2 that represents the position of the robot. And the derivatives are depicted here by these two sub-equations, where x3 is the heading and x4 is the velocity. And as well, we have two inputs of the system for depicting the acceleration of the robot and the rotational rate. So below, I represent things graphically with some operators, and we have the variables that are represented here. So what we do usually is we decompose our system, we break down all the equations into elementary relations. And for each of these elementary relations, we will associate an operator for computing the related sets, the sets related to the variables of the system. For instance, here, for each operator, we will, for each relation, that we call also constraint, we will associate an operator that is called a contractor in our case to handle these constraints. And for each variable, we will represent them in our solver by sets. And in our case, all the sets will be tubes as we have seen before. So all the contractors here act on tubes in order to reduce them. And finally, we will perform the state estimation with computed tubes for the states. So to do this, usually we go through a decomposition step where we introduce some intermediate variables like this one here. We have Vx and Vy that are physically the derivatives, the velocities of the robot along the X and Y axes. And I represent them here in blue. So these variables are not inputs of the system, but they are needed in our approach to in order to be able to use contractors that are already existing. So the involved operators here are 4 contractors. We have a contractor related to the multiplication, another one to the cosine operation, the sine, and last one, C, we call it d over dt, which is a contractor related to derivative information. So we'll see more about it a bit later. And because we have operators, we have sets on which we we apply our operators, and these sets here are tubes. So we have the 4D tubes for the state, 2D tubes for the inputs, and intermediate variables, as I said before. So it's classical in with constraint programming, because we have sets of variables, related domains in which the variables lies, and we have constraints implemented by contractors that aim at narrowing the bounds of our sets. So we can define several classes of several kinds of operators, of contractors. We'll say that we have the static contractors that are not related to differential equations, and we have differential contractors. So the first class of contractors, the static one, is related to constraints that are non-differential. I mean, not in the form, in the form of an ODE, and they are also non-intertemporal, which means that they do not link different times. So classically, we can depict a static constraint with this formalism, with a function f, several trajectories in our case. It could be vectors, and in our case, several trajectories, and this is our constraint. Here, I represent two examples of tubes, arbitrary tubes, a tube A here, enclosing a set of feasible trajectories A, and another one here, B, with different thickness along time. If I apply a contractor for the cosine operation on these two tubes, in order to be compliant with this constraint here, I am able to contract the tubes and then remove all the gray part of the tubes here that are non-consistent with this relation here. This means that we can say in a guaranteed way that there is no trajectory in this gray part that is compliant with this relation and with the other envelope here, B. So we can apply it, and in fact, to build this contractor on tubes, we simply use contractors as we do usually on boxes. And these contractors already exist in libraries such as IBEX, for instance. And we can apply them here because they are static on each slices of the tubes. Here I give, just in order to demystify a little bit the definition of a contractor, I give here the definition of a C+ operator for the addition constraint here. So we have three variables, A, X, and Y. They are linked by this relation, this addition constraint. And if we have variables as trajectories, if we want to apply this relation on three trajectories, then the trajectories will be handled by their sets, I mean by tubes, and we will apply the C+ contractor on the three tubes. And this definition is given by the following equation here. At each time instant t, we apply the classical addition operator. So if you are not familiar with contractor, you can see on this equation that in any case, we ensure that the tube cannot become bigger after the call of an operator because it is contracted by himself at least. In the worst case, there will be no contraction, and then we will obtain the same tube as the beginning. But if we are lucky, we are able, like this, to obtain a better approximation of our trajectories according to this constraint. So this was for static constraints, quite easy to process. And in order to completely deal with state estimation problems, we also have to consider differential equations. And our goal is to break down the system at most. And when we break down it at maximum, we obtain this very elementary relation, x dot is equal to v, which could be the most simple ODE we could deal with. So I give an example here. We have two tubes, one tube V here in blue and another one X here. And we consider that all the feasible derivatives of the trajectories contained in this tube here are enclosed in the tube V here. And we will try to reach a consistency state between these two tubes by applying a contractor following this constraint here. And this contractor is called in the literature CDDT to represent the differential aspect of the relation. And after the call of this contractor, we have the following result here. The gray part of the tube X has been contracted. So the result may seem quite awkward because we have something awkward here, but it's related to the derivatives set here. So we have, for instance, on the first part of the temporal domain, we have negative derivatives here, which means that we will keep only decreasing trajectories for X. And it's the opposite for the next part of the temporal domain. We have positive derivatives, and then we keep increasing trajectories. And at this point, after one call of the contractor, we can say that we reached a consistency state between these two tubes according to this relation here. And this is one step that we can use for state estimation in robotics. The main advantage is that because we only rely on the bounds of the sets, we can easily process actual data coming from our sensors, for instance. And just to demystify a little bit these contractors, and in particular this one, I give here the definition, the mathematical definition of this derivative contractor here. So I remind that it takes two tubes as input, and at the end, only one of the two tubes will be contracted. The equation is quite simple, in fact. It means that for any slice of the X tube here, for instance, I take one T here, we will compute the intersection of all the other slices of the tube transported by integration on this time T here. So for instance, here the T1 is another slice, for instance, this one, that will be transported to our time T here, thanks to information provided by the derivative tube V. That can be uncertain also. And because this tube may be uncertain, in practice, only the neighborhood around T will bring information for the contraction. And as you can see also, we are not able to contract the derivative tube with this operator. The reason is that as long as we are dealing with tube X that has some thickness, it means that in the tube we are enclosing a set of a lot of feasible trajectories, in fact, and including trajectories that may be discontinuous or presenting any kind of derivative. So for this reason, as long as we have some thickness on the tube X, we are not able to contract the tube V because all the derivatives are feasible, in fact. So that was for these two classes of contractors. I could go into details about other contractors. Others exist for dealing with tubes, for instance, for processing time uncertainties or even temporal delays, for instance, or composition of functions. Then it depends the problem we are dealing with. And then usually so if I come back to the equations of our problem, we perform a decomposition of the problem, and then we call the contractors, the elementary contractors that are available on the defined tubes. So some of the tubes or sets are coming from the inputs of the system or depicting the state of our problem, and the other one may be intermediate variables. So we have at hand, we consider that we have available some contractors already existing in the literature. For instance, they may be implemented by other people. And in particular, they are available in the IBEX library as well as in the Kodak library. What we do usually is that we then call all the contractors step by step, a bit like on this slide. And we will call them until no more set can be contracted. And so we can call this list several times until there is no more contraction. And at this step, we will consider that we have reached a fixed point where the best approximation of our sets has been obtained. Another approach now with the new Kodak library is to consider contractor networks, which means to represent things graphically like here, and to connect the contractors and the domain on this kind of graph. The main advantage is that for one given contractor, we will manage a bit better the propagation of the information in this network. For instance, here we have contractors represented by boxes and domains represented by circles. If I take this contractor here, it is connected to two domains. If I launch the contractor, if I execute it, it may be able to contract these two domains here. And if it is able to contract the domain B, for instance, an interval or a tube, then we know that we will have to call the contractors related to this domain here. For instance, this one here related to the cosine, and this one here also. And step by step, according to the contraction of the domain or not, we're able to propagate information in some efficient way. The main difficult part after that is to find some good heuristic for propagation in this kind of graph in order to avoid minor contractions and to be as fast as possible. In any case, with this approach or this one with contractor networks, the results at the end in terms of power of contraction are the same. It's just about time processing. Another advantage of contractor networks that was motivating at first is to connect several, we could say, heterogeneous domains. I mean, to connect with several constraints, intervals, boxes, tubes, intervals of graph, intervals of sets, and different kind of domains like this. And this was not easy with the previous approach. So we are working on this in order to reach, in order to be able to process a more complicated problem as we encounter usually in robotics. A quick word about decomposition, and a drawback of this approach of decomposition is that, as I said before, we may have to introduce some intermediate variables to perform the decomposition. For instance, here we have the classical equation x dot equal to f of x and u, and we introduce a variable v, v as a result of f, and x dot is equal to v for the derivative information. This allows us to use elementary contractors that are available. For instance, one as a composition of analytical function, Cf here, and the other one for the derivative constraint, as we have seen before. So this is convenient, but we are going through an intermediate variable that is enclosed in a tube, and due to our representation of tubes, we introduce some pessimism on V due to wrapping effects. So this is something on which we have to work on in order to have better estimations based on these equations. There are some studies that have been made in this domain, still in this contractor approach. And I invite you, for instance, to look at the thesis of August Bourgeois, who worked on the loaner contractor for dealing with this equation here. So still without the U, with uncertainties with the U, but fully dealing with this, this x dot is equal to f of x equation that we encounter usually in robotics. And using a dedicated contractor for this equation is better than performing this decomposition here, of course. So if I come back to the state estimation problem with our equations, so we have the evolution equation here. We assume that we perform the decomposition, so we have some intermediate variable for V here. I have here on this, this representation a trajectory depicted in white of a mobile robot, for instance, evolving on a plane. And the tube of feasible positions of the robot is represented in blue here, like a box. So we do not know, we do not have any knowledge about the state. If I implement this in our contractor approach with a contractor for F and for V, I will not be able to contract anything about X because we do not have an initial condition. If I add then an initial condition on the state, for instance, if I say that at T0 the states belong to some box, for instance, enclosed in this red box here, we are able to launch the propagations and to perform, in this case, a simple IVP problem. As you can see, we are able to contract the tube of positions, and because the information of initial condition is only set as a restriction on the initial box at T0, we have some pessimism that is increasing with time along the tube. And then in this constraint programming approach, we are able to set observations or restrictions anywhere we want quite easily, only by depicting, only by using the appropriate contractors related to the equations. So the main advantage here is that we still keep something that is quite simple to use. We only focus on the equations, and then we transform them into contractors, and we apply them on sets, and we obtain the sets of feasible values. Then if I go a step forward, now we do not have any knowledge about the states, so no initial conditions, but we'll instead consider range-only measurements from a non-beacon. So for instance, let us consider a landmark here, this box here, and a set of range-only measurements, so distances between the positions of the robot and the landmark. So we add in our problem this observation equation here, based on the G function, that is nonlinear in our case, and that links our observation to our state at several times here. So in this approach, we will consider a tube related to the output of the function J here. This tube is represented in gray here, and it can be computed thanks to this relation here, that is the observation equation, the distance between the robot and the landmark. So as long as we have some information, some knowledge about the states here, we'll be able to propagate information to G, to the tube of feasible distances between the robot and the landmark. And as well, thanks to some observations, we will be able to contract, to narrow the tube at several observation times. And then we don't have to decide how to propagate the information. We will only let the contractors propagate things and finally converge to a better state estimation. So in this case, if I take the first observation here, I am able to contract the tube like this. So this is the value of one observation. And I can analytically compute a derivative for G based on this relation here, because I have information about the state X and its derivative coming from this F function here. So based on that, I can not only contract the tube at time 70, for instance, but also propagate information a little bit backward and forward in time. Then I consider a second observation, and I can do the same, propagate information backward and forward in time. And in the meantime, due to this propagation here, I am able to improve information that we had on the state X. Because this constraint here, thanks to contractors, can work, as we say, forward and backward, not in time this time, but forward and backward in terms of variables. So we can propagate information from G to X and also to X to G. So we can consider several measurements like this. And on this example, we can see that at some point, we're able to raise some constraints, or at least to contract the tube on other parts of the domain. And this means that we are able to remove some singularities of the problem. And finally, if we consider a force measurement, we are able to at least here estimate the initial position of the robot and to propagate information in time. And then other observations will simply improve our tube of feasible observations. So I recall that this tube contains all the feasible distances between the robot and the landmark. It has been narrowed at some points by measurements that we made. And still considering this observation here, this constraint, sorry, we are able to propagate this contraction of the tube towards the tube of states, which is our goal, in fact, for state estimation. So if I come back to the plane here, so to the plane of positions of the robot, and I propagate things to the states, I am able here to contract the tube to this tube here, containing all the feasible trajectories of the robot according to these constraints and this set of measurements here. Okay, is it clear so far, or before I go to the second step of the video? Okay, so now we will apply the presented tools to the problem of data association that is linked to indistinguishable landmarks, which is something that we usually encounter in robotics. So this example will be illustrated by a robot that is the basis of some of our experiments here in Brest, which is this DORAD AUV. So normally you see the video, interrupt me if you don't see it. This AUV, I mean Autonomous Underwater Vehicle, is a robot managed by the Army in France. Its name is DORAD, and it is able to perform missions underwater in completely autonomous. And to do this, it is equipped with a set of sensors, I mean sonars and velocity sensors on its hull, and in particular, some lateral sensors here, what we call lateral sonar, that is able to perceive the seabed, the bottom of the ocean, in some lateral way. So this is quite useful to bring information, and in particular, some observations of our states, because the main difficulty with these robots is to localize them underwater, because we do not have access to positioning systems like GPS, for instance. And so we have to develop techniques in order to localize the robot and take advantage of its acquisitions. So this is a topic we are working on in Brest. And we are trying here to localize DORAD, the DORAD robot, based on some observations that has been made during its mission. So DORAD is equipped with lateral sonar. You can see a picture of another lateral sonar here, equipped with two antennas providing information about some items of the environment, such as rocks, for instance. So the principle is quite simple. You have a sonar here that emits some acoustical signals on each side of the robot. And due to this geometrical configuration, we are able to quite easily perceive, for instance, rocks on the seabed. Here, just for, it's just another image of an acquisition performed by a sonar lateral sonar on top of an old boat here, a wreck of an old boat in the Rad of Brest here. So you can see that we can see the boat here on at the bottom of the ocean, and some shadows projected by the boat itself on the seabed. So as you can see, these informations are quite difficult to process, even to analyze. Here, it's difficult to recognize a boat, or at least which boat it could be. And we have a lot of noise and shadows that are difficult to process in this kind of images. So in the case of DORAD, that is equipped here by this kind of sonar, we will simply use, we will consider that we are able to detect some rocks on the seabed, such as this one here. We can see here 3 rocks, even more, but we'll say that we are not sure. And we will not be able, in fact, to distinguish one rock from another. We consider that they all look alike. It is too difficult today to rely on some algorithms that could determine identities of these rocks. So to deal with our problem, we will set some assumptions. The first one is that the map is static, which means that it does not evolve with time, and made of some landmarks that are points, some rocks. The second assumption, the big one, in fact, because of it is this problem of data association. The second assumption is that all the landmarks are considered indistinguishable, as you can see here on this with 5 examples here. The third assumption is that the position of the landmarks is known in the map. So the robot considers that it has on board, for instance, a map of the environment that is known, that is priorly known. And the fourth assumption is that the initial pose of the robot is not known, and which is quite important in robotics, in underwater robotics, because during the diving phase, when the robot reaches its operational area, the robot may lost its own position. So we consider that at first we do not know where the robot starts. So what we will have to do now is a state estimation, of course, in order to localize the robot, and this will be done together with some data association, in which we will try to identify each rock that is perceived. What I mean is that for each perception of a rock on the seabed, we'll try to associate the rock in the map that is embedded in the robot. And this will allow us to solve the state estimation problem. And in the same time, the state estimation will bring information to the data association. And then we obtain a kind of a chicken and egg problem, as we usually encounter in robotics for simultaneous localization and mapping problems, for instance. So if I recall the formalism of the problem, we consider that we have a map of the environment, M, depicted by M here. So it's all these blue boxes that we have here. So possibly the items of the environment are known to be bounded with some uncertainties. Then we have our evolution equation. We have some information coming from the inputs of the system and also inertial sensors or velocity sensors. And finally, we have an observation equation that links the observations of the landmarks, of the rocks on the seabed, to the states of the robot. So that's the equation of the problem. And just to see how we can solve it using constraint propagation approaches, I will depict here a simple 1D example of this application. So we consider in 1D that we have a set of landmarks here that are depicted by green stars. They are positioned at these places, and we have 3 states of positions for the robot. The actual but unknown positions are depicted by these blue figures. And for each of these states here, we are able to perceive some landmarks here in this 1D example. So because we perceive these landmarks, we are able to consider some constraints that will be listed here on the left part of the figure. The constraints are that we know that the state of the robot, the position, belongs to the map of the environment, because at each time we are able to perceive some of the landmarks. Then we also consider a simple evolution equation in the 1D case, depicting how we can go from one state to another. For this case here, we have 2 equations, backward and forward in time, to go through x0 and x2. So now if I launch a classical constraint approach, we could say, we first consider that the robot could be at any places. So it's the initial domains for our variables, state variables. We then consider that the robot is perceiving one of the landmarks. And so we consider this constraint, and we are able to remove a set of feasible states. Then we consider in the second time the integration of this state towards the second one. So in this case, a simple equation. And we transport the feasible states here. Also, as we did before, we consider that we are perceiving a landmarks, and so we are able to remove some of the feasible states. And step by step like this, we're able to converge towards one good estimation of the position of the robot for x2. And we can, using previous equations, propagate this information backward in time. So this was a very simple example in 1D and with discrete sets of feasible values. If we now apply a set membership approach here, we will instead consider intervals for representing the range of feasible values for our states. And as well, we will not use the previous equations, but we will use contractors on these intervals here in order to reduce the feasible values. So if I apply the contractor related to the map, which means that the robot is perceiving one landmark, we're able like this to contract the interval. But of course, less than before, because I mean, we are only acting now on the bounds of the interval. And so we have some pessimism because we are enclosing some infeasible possibilities. But this will not be necessarily a problem because we will propagate things up to some fixed point, and it will require more iterations, but at the end, we may be able to converge towards some efficient approximation. In this case, something completely estimated. So this was just a simple example. I don't know if it helps to understand how we can identify the landmarks and in the meantime, localize in the environment. If we now come back to some more realistic context in 2D, we have the robot position depicted in 2D by x1, x2, the landmark M located at this position, and we have a 2D vector for the observation, the distance and what we call the bearing, which means the angular position of the landmark with respect to the orientation of the robot. In this case, the observation equation is the following, and we may explain it, we may depict it in some implicit form like this, where the position of the landmark appears in the function. In this case, M is a vector depicting the position of the landmark and also the identity of the landmark. We'll see this later. So in the general case, we have these simple equations corresponding to some localization with some landmarks. And the problem in our case is that the landmarks are observed, but we do not know which landmark we are perceiving. So there may be some uncertainties related to this Y vector here, coming from, for instance, the quality of the sensors or the difficulties related to acoustics. But the main uncertainties will come from this vector here, Mi, because we do not know what we are looking for, what the sensor is looking. So in fact, we'll reformalize the problem with this relation here. We have Mi, the vector Mi here, that is possibly belonging to one of the boxes of the environment, the box M1, etc., until the box ML. So one of the boxes here corresponds to the observation we made. Another way to represent things is to say simply that Mi belongs to the set M here. And this is another constraint that we have to deal with in order to fully solve our problem. So why I speak about this problem today is that it's an interesting case with, we could say, heterogeneous constraints. We have a discrete constraint here, which means that M is one of the items of a discrete set. And we have continuous constraints, and one of them is differential. So we have to develop or to use a solver or tools that are comfortable with these different kinds of constraints here. So for these two constraints here, the differential one, the observation, we have seen before that tools already exist for dealing with them, possibly with some decompositions and using tubes, for instance. And it remains to deal with this constraint here, quite simple, but we will see how we can deal with it. So if I represent things with realistic images here, we have this constraint here, Mi, that belongs to the map of the environment, the set M. The set M here is represented by these white boxes here. So possibly with some uncertainties, it depends how the map has been acquired, for instance. Then from the position of the robot, we have some prior information about its state, for instance. And so using this constraint here, the observation equation, we are able to compute a first estimation of the MI vector here and its related boxes. In fact, MI corresponds to the identity of the rock, but also to the position of the landmark in the map. So if we compute a first estimation of this vector here, we can obtain, for instance, here, 3 possible boxes, a red one, the blue one, and the yellow one, corresponding to the position of landmarks that have been perceived by 3 measurements. And then our goal is to apply a contractor related to this constraint here, the MI that belongs to M, and to deal only with this constraint here. And if we do this, we are able to contract the boxes, the colored boxes, in order to only keep the white boxes that was inside the prior sets. As you can see here, the blue box fits perfectly the 2 white boxes. The red box corresponds to only 1 landmark, so it becomes directly the white box that was inside. And the yellow box was, in fact, becomes an empty set, which means that the data was not consistent with the map on the environment. In practice, this case should not happen. And then, once we have been able to reduce the positions of the perceived landmarks, we are then able to propagate this information backward towards the state of the robot. And like this, taking information from the states towards landmarks and from the landmarks towards the states, we are able to compute in some iterative way a state estimation, and in the meantime to identify all the rocks in the environment. So practically, this contractor is given by the following definition. So we have the set of discrete items of the environment, set M, and we try to compute a given box X here, a 2D box in our case, and we will compute the union of all the intersections between the box and the items of the map. In many cases, this will be empty sets, and otherwise, when MJ is a subset of X, then we will compute all the union, the squared envelope of these intersections. So it is quite easy to implement in practice. And then if I come back to the problem in general, we have our 3 relations here. We have the observation equation here, and we can break down the 3 equations here into elementary relations. So they are very elementary because here, as you can see, we have difference, additions, some polar constraint here related to the range and bearing observation. We find again our what we call constellation contractor, so the contractor related to the map of the environment. And we have the differential equation here, as we have seen before. So we have a way to depict our problem here with a set of 7 elementary constraints. And of course, these constraints are elementary, so we are able to find in some tools or in the literature already existing contractors for dealing with them. So we define tubes for all that is evolving with time. We define some intervals for our boxes for the measurements, for instance. We define also intermediate variables coming from the decomposition. And finally, we apply all the contractors to these sets, and we let the solver reduce the sets, contract the sets, and then performing the estimation. So I provide some references here, for instance, the polar contractor here that links these 4 intervals according to this constraint here. So this is an example of an operator developed by Benoît Desrochers that is already existing in the literature, and we only have to use it on these intervals in order to compute this relation here. So if we call all these contractors inside the contractor network using the Kodak library, for instance, we have this kind of graph here. So it's a full graph of the problem, in fact. I have represented in blue here all the inputs, we could say, of the problem, all the information. I mean, the measurements Y, the range, and the bearing. the input of the system, x3 and x4 that are the heading of the robot and the speed of the robot that are assumed to be measured, and also the times of the observations. And all the other black circles are what we call intermediate variables coming from the decomposition of the problem. And then we call the operators, the contractors, and we let the solver, the contractor network, the solver contract things at most, and finally provide an estimation for the X tube. So on the right-hand side, it's the Python code related to this contractor network, just to show that it is quite simple to use in practice. So we define a contractor network here, that is an object in the Kodak library. We add to this object, to this graph, two contractors here, for instance, contractor related to the evolution function, another one to the derivative relation. And we connect them to a set of tubes here, so variables that are representing tubes. And then for each observation in the environment, we create intermediate variables, A, D, and P, and we add some contractors, as we do in this graph here, involving the constellation contractor, plus, minus, polar, eval, that is another contractors on tube. We connect them to the domains, and then we call the contract method in order to launch the propagation and contract the domains until the computer reach a fixed point when nothing more can be contracted. So if we apply this on the actual data set coming from the DORAD IUV, we obtain this kind of a figure at the end. So I can explain a little bit this figure. So it's actual data here. The robot started from this position, and what you can see in blue is the tube of the position of the robot. In white, it's an estimation of the actual trajectory of the robot obtained by external means, I mean by acoustical baseline. And along the trajectory, the robot is able to detect some of the rocks of the environment. So the map of the environment is represented by blue boxes here in background. And some of the rocks, not all of them, are detected by the robot and with some uncertainties. So if I zoom on it, you can see that the range and bearing observation is depicted by a pie here, with uncertainties, angular uncertainties, and uncertainties on the range also. And when the landmark is detected and identified by the robot, which means that the robot is able to identify the landmark in the map that is embedded during the mission, then the landmark is represented in orange. Otherwise, some of them are not fully identified. For instance, this one here, it has been detected but not identified, and it remains in white. So I have a video to show you how it works in real time. So at first, remember that we cannot say that we do not have any knowledge about the initial condition of the robot, I mean the initial position. So at first, the tube of the feasible positions for the robot is all the environment, all the space represented in blue here. And you may see in background some of the items of the map. So the robot starts, it performs some observations with its lateral sonar, and it will be able, step by step, to propagate information from these first estimations, from these first perceptions. And as you can see, up to now, it is not able to identify the landmarks, but still, it has been able to improve its estimation of a position. As you can see here, the tube has been contracted, the tube of positions. And suddenly, because of the configuration of the perceptions, we can say, as for constellations of stars, we have a specific organization of the landmarks in the perceptions that is compliant with the part of the map embedded in the robot. And due to this configuration, apparently the robot has been able to estimate its trajectory and also its initial position. So what you can see here in red is the scope of the sonar lateral, of the lateral sonar, sorry. And what you can see in gray is a projection of the acquisition. So it's basically what the robot have seen during the mission. I launch the video. And so what is depicted in orange is the landmarks that are fully identified. And what you can see is that along the mission, the robot is able to limit its drift and keep a quite good estimate of its position. And also, a last remark is that the white trajectory inside the tube that we could consider as the truth is inside enclosed in this blue tube. In fact, this trajectory can be may not represent the reality because it comes from acoustical sensors and it is very difficult to process in practice. So that was for the video, and at the end, that was in fact for the state estimation part. And at the end, in the meantime, we also performed the data association. So we identified our landmark. And if I represent these associations here on this table, here we have the number of iterations for the propagation of the information, of the contractions. And we have here, this number is the minimal number of objects that is included in the M boxes. And at the end, we can see that all the boxes have been identified. Sorry, except one boxes is not identified because we still have 2 feasible works for the perception. So at least over the 54 detections, we have been able to identify 51 landmarks in the map. And this is another view of the, as we have seen before, it's a metric to represent the thickness of the boxes, of the position boxes along time, representing the drift of the localization with time. So the gray lines like this represent the observations. And as you can see, the drift is maintained. In the worst case, we have something like 20 meters of errors. And without any prior knowledge about the initial state, we still have been able to have a good estimation of the initial position of the robot during the mission. So just to conclude, what is interesting in this approach is, according to us, the simplicity, because we only have to consider the equations of the problem and find the related contractors. We also take advantage of interval analysis with the reliability of the results, which means that we can make proof, and more precisely, we can ensure the safety of the systems, which is interesting when we have to manage autonomous vehicles such as DORAD. And also an advantage of constant programming is that we focus on the what instead of the how, which means that we do not have to have a specific knowledge about resolution methods. We only call the contractors as they are, and then we let the solver compute the estimation. And we believe, at least that's a part of the remaining studies, we believe that we can deal with quite complex systems, and we still have a lot of work to do on some complex constraints that have to be managed. But up to now, we have been able to deal with a quite big range of robotics problems, such as the one that you have seen in this presentation. And if you are interested, I invite you to look at the Kodak library. That is a fusion, in fact, of the PyBex library and the TubeX library. And if I, normally you should see my my navigator, my browser now. If you go to the Kodak web page here, you are able to directly use what I've presented in this presentation. So contractor networks and also a set of contractors, such as those given here. So for instance, if I go on the contractors related to dynamical systems, we can find again the contractors related to the derivative information, but also other contractors that are available for other kind of problems. Okay, thanks. That's about all for this presentation. So thanks a lot for.
Okay, many thanks, Simon, for your presentation. That was very, very interesting. And I think your talk is now open for discussions.
Okay.
Who wants to start? Okay, if no one wants to start at the beginning, let me start a little bit. I think it was on your slide number 9. Maybe you could go back, where you mentioned the Lona contractor. No, it wasn't the slide number 9. Then it was
this one, I think. Yes.
Yes, it was here, the slide 13. Yes. Yes, it's you're right with this, that you could use this Lona contractor for further, let's say, reducing the pessimism of the computed trajectories. I was wondering here if it makes sense to take further into account, let's say, some modeling information. For example, when you're considering some robotics applications or mechanical systems, you could derive equations of motion in such a way that you have some conservation properties. Let's say, for example, you're using, let's say, a Hamiltonian framework. You have a measure for the total energy of a system, and you know that changes of your total energy can only occur due to an actuator. In your case, the system inputs you. That means you could compute worst case bounds also on the energy and energy variations. Would this help you in this case to, let's say, define some augmented set of state variables that takes into account the actual system states X and also the energy as a further state variable in order to enhance this information?
But still, you would have an evolution function like this with this formalism, right? You mean that maybe you don't have the U?
Yes, that you include a further state variable in X that takes into account conservation properties.
Okay.
That means, let's say you have n state variables so far, and the n plus first state variable would be the total energy. And you know bounds on the total energy because those could be computed in a separate way directly by modeling.
Okay, but what you mean is related to the Lona contractor, for instance, or the...
Yes, I think it would be some kind of mixture. On the one hand, it is a dynamic contractor like the Lona contractor that you have here. And on the other hand, because you know a priori bounds on the energy, it would be, at least for some points in time, an algebraic contractor that you had before.
Okay, so that would lead to a specific contractor taking into account this notion of energy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there are many systems where you could, let's say, have something like a combined, I don't know how to call it. Let's call it energy contractor or something that is combining dynamic system information on the one hand.
Okay.
With some static information or some pointwise information at specific points in time.
And without decomposing the system.
I think you can include it into the decomposition that you presented.
But maybe as in the same way as Lona contractor, without decomposing the F function at least.
Yes. For that part without decomposing, but for this pointwise observations, you could use the decomposition technique.
Okay, yes. Okay, yes.
Any questions from the audience? If not, I have a philosophical question. What you did so far is something like a SLAM technique purely in a set valued, let's say, yes, environment. Could it make sense to use your technique as some kind of pre-processing stage for stochastic SLAM techniques? For example, to solve at least yes, in a pre-processing stage some data association tasks for stochastic SLAM algorithms to rule out some configurations that don't make any sense, and later on use also classical stochastic techniques for SLAM simultaneous localization and mapping.
I wouldn't say that it is SLAM. Maybe you know why? Because we already have a map of the environment at hand.
Oh, yes.
So,
yes, from that perspective, you're right. But if you want to perform SLAM,
yes, okay.
If it makes sense to rule out some configurations that don't make sense.
Yes, it makes sense. Yes, we use these techniques on SLAM, and it works. It works well because usually SLAM, we represent SLAM with a graph of constraints also. I mean, we could use this formalism here. So it's quite natural to use contractors to solve this kind of problem, yes. I don't know if it's your question initially.
No, the question, yes, this was a part of the question. The other thing is if you thought about interfaces, the stochastic SLAM techniques.
Maybe yes. Maybe the problem would be the computation time. I don't know, because in these approaches you have to launch a lot of samples, right?
Yes.
And so I don't know if it's efficient, because still we have a lot of computations to perform here on this set. So using it for stochastic operations, I don't know, to be honest.
So the question is more or less, does it make sense, for example, to rule out some samples that really don't make any sense and use this, for example, to speed up a stochastic approach?
Maybe yes. If we are able to reach some empty sets in a fast way, maybe yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So any other questions from the audience? Let me browse through the list. No one has raised their hand so far.
I don't have a question, but thanks for a very nice talk.
Okay, thanks a lot.
I have maybe a question that could be something as an outlook. You presented this dynamic system model with the 4 state variables where you have those 2 positions
Yes.
and velocity information additionally, or 2 positions, 1 angle, and the velocity. The question is, you could augment also the system model by some variables for external disturbances.
Yes.
How complex would it be, for example, to use such an augmented system model to identify bounds on external disturbances? In this case, external currents that lead to drift phenomena, external torques or forces.
Then it depends if we increase the state variables, and then it will depend on the observations we can make on this state, of course. So I don't see any problem if, as long as we have enough observations of our state.
Means enough information with respect to something like observability.
And with respect to the components of the state that we are trying to identify. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it would depend on the model of F that we would be using in this case.
Yes, but in general, you would say it's not really critical to, let's say, enlarge the number of state variables in some reasonable manner.
Yes, but still in this approach, we are not performing branch and bound techniques. So as long as the contractors are quite simple and working well on the states, we are not. We can increase the number of dimensions of the states, I think. But
okay. Do we have any other questions?
I could have a question about
Yes, please go ahead, Fabrice.
About outliers. For example, you could imagine that you have some estimation of the heading over time. For example, using the state equation.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that you have, for example, also a sensor like a magnetometer that is also able to give you an estimation of the heading. And so we could expect that sometime due to, for example, about or I would say you could have sometimes magnetic perturbation at some point during the trajectory on the magnetometer data. How do you already have some tools inside Kodak, for example, to handle those kind of outliers that could happen only at some slices? And also, do you have some tools to make the intersection a relaxed intersection between several tubes where sometimes one tube could be wrong?
Yes, that's a very good question. To be honest, no. We don't have this kind of relaxed intersection in Kodak yet. At least if the relaxed intersection is modeled as a contractor, there is no problem to use it as a part of the contractor network inside Kodak. But otherwise, it would be very nice to be able to, how can I say, to define a set of feasible outliers or a ratio of outliers on some of the constraints. In this case, on some of the observations, in order to to relax, as you said, the sets. But for now, at the moment, it's not available. Yes, that's for future work. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Comments, suggestions for future work? Advertisement for future PhD students? Yes. If this is not the case, again, many thanks, Simo, for your very interesting presentation.
Thanks a lot.